Hello and welcome. And we're here at Holistic Investments, and I'm excited to have a new amazing guest with me here. It's Zenobia Godschalk. She's a CEO and founder of a multi-million-dollar PR firm. She's a founding team, a member at Hedera Hashgraph, and launched and grown like multiple billion-dollar plus tech companies. And I have a feeling that she's just an amazing human being who we're going to explore, her story today. Hi, Zenobia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And, I'm your host, Konstantin Kogun. And as a reminder, we respect legal and compliance part of it. So like this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information as material, legal, tax, investment, financial, any other advice. Now we can talk about anything we want, but traditionally we start with you, Zenobia. Like, tell us about your story. Like, you obviously are a successful entrepreneur. I mean, I've heard your amazing talk on TEDx, and you've been building companies, for, a long time. But I want to hear specifically the part when you made a decision to pivot to blockchain and crypto. So,
Sure, absolutely. I think a lot of people, when they look at people's journeys, they think, oh, well, this person sort of knew from day one what they wanted to do. And I think when you talk to most people, they didn't know, necessarily what they wanted to do. I mean, this industry didn't exist when I graduated from school. So I think, I want to set that as sort of the piece of advice, which is that sort of take opportunities where they come, right? I was fortunate to, I graduated from Stanford at a time when the internet was just starting. And so I had worked at Intel. I then went and worked for a company called LoudCloud, which became Opsware. It was started by Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And we were very early in what today is commonly referred to as cloud computing. And so we were, managing and hosting cloud infrastructure for companies. We talked a little bit before, starting the recording that at the time, people said, this internet thing is probably a fad. There were a lot of scams. There were a lot of companies that failed. And I think a lot of the naysayers said, well, phew, I'm so glad we can be done with that. Like, let's go on with our lives. And today we see the internet, in being used in ways that we never dreamed of. And it took a while to build all of that infrastructure. So I was there. We sold LoudCloud. We actually became Opsware. We sold it to HP. I took a role on the sell side for an investment bank covering internet security and infrastructure. That was a great entree into that space. I think when we built the internet, we thought this is going to be a great utopia, and look, let's make it as open and free as possible, and people will be able to be creative. And what we probably didn't think about enough was the bad actors, right? Anything that is open and has been designed to be open will have vulnerabilities and will have risks. And so I worked in the cybersecurity industry. That was what I covered as a sell-side analyst. That was, and still is to this day, what Zag Communications, the PR agency I founded, mostly focuses on. And so that was really trying to address, we have this infrastructure, we have, good folks who are working tirelessly every day to protect it. But on the other side, we have all these bad actors who are, stealing billions of dollars or people's information, or always coming up with new ways to leverage the internet, unfortunately, to do bad things. So I got into crypto through that angle, right? Through the angle of really cryptography, not cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, of course, being a big part of our industry, but I met Dr. Lehman Baird and Mance Harmon. They actually both also have a cybersecurity background. They have a background in AI and machine learning. That's where their formal training is. But they had also started cybersecurity companies and had been working at cybersecurity companies. So we met through that industry connection. And they came to Atlanta and we developed the very first messaging for Swirlds, which is the company that, owned and developed the Hashgraph IP, which they, have now given to the Hedera Network and Hedera Council. And so we started building Swirlds. Lehman has always had this vision of shared worlds. the ability for people to, come together in a place that's a safe space on the internet. They can create their own communities. And then when we started Hedera, it was really, okay, it seems like this technology can then be applicable to a lot of different things. It seems like a lot of things need this trust layer, right? The internet needs a trust layer. New technologies need a trust layer. Finance needs a trust layer. And so, we launched a public network. That was back in 2018. And we've been building it and growing the ecosystem ever since.
I mean, that's impressive by itself. Like, I think like what you've achieved so far is definitely, is a great example for a lot of women entrepreneurs also. Because I know right now we still in our industry, well, I've read the last report, like it's still like about 7% of female presence in the entire industry. So I think it's a great inspiration for all the female listeners who's gonna or people who watch this. But on the other side, like just to talk about like your experience, I know that you're also, besides Stanford, by the way, you have like multiple other executive educations, right? So you've been in Cambridge and you have an economics degree also from Cambridge, if I'm not mistaken.
So Cambridge was actually during my undergrad. I spent time at Cambridge. So
Okay.
while I was there, I was lucky enough to do an exchange program there, and it's a beautiful place and was really what inspired my love of economics. I had a great set of professors there who really brought that to life and were engaged in everything from, the World Bank and other policy, making big decisions, making big sort of thoughts and ideas in terms of how economics affects all of our daily lives.
And yeah, so this is by itself, like the combo of Cambridge and Stanford is impressive. So we'll give you that. And coming back to your journey, like, okay, you ended up in Hadera Hashgraph, and right now this is kind of your core focus at the moment, right? So can you explain a little bit, maybe like in a very layman terms, like what is Hedera Hashgraph? Like as we all can obviously read it as like layer one solution, right? But that doesn't give a lot of context, right? Can you explain it from inside, like how is it different from other layer one solutions, and what is unique about it?
Sure. And I think, if you sort of put together two things, right? If you think about the capabilities of a layer one and a layer two, Hedera has most of those natively. So a lot of the challenges that we have seen in terms of, okay, we've had all these layer one networks, and then how do we scale them? And how do we make sure that they are secure? And how do we make sure that they are fast? Those are all the solutions that layer twos have been built to solve. But Hedera has actually had all of those capabilities from day one. So Lehman thought a lot about, okay, well, if this is really going to be used by the entire world, of course it has to be scalable. Of course it has to be able to do thousands of transactions per second. You can actually see the network doing that today. It is, I think we just hit 41 billion transactions. And those are real world transactions. That's not the network coming to consensus. That is, people pushing transactions through the network. It has to be secure. And so this path that we have taken, ensures that security and keeps security front of mind, because obviously that's, our background. And, those kinds of risks are really risks that you have to weigh as fundamental risks to a network. So scalability, security, and then speed, right? So Bitcoin was designed purposely to be slow, right? You have to go solve this problem in order to write transactions to a network. That's great if, that's the purpose of the network. But when you're trying to push transactions through and you want, people to be running their enterprise applications on this, you need it to be fast. So those are really three of the differentiators where I think that people say, wait a minute, if I either have to pick between having a layer one and then perhaps a layer two that I've put on top of it, that just increases the technical complexity of what you're dealing with. Those are then two different technology stacks or pieces of, of code that you then have to be dependent on. So really having that from day one, I think has been a key differentiator.
And yeah, and your consensus is hash graph is also pretty unique, right? It's called hash graph distributed consensus algorithm, right? So It's unlike the like what I understand, like the proof of work that you mentioned, right? You have like, basically community of nodes running into Hashgraph, and like, and you also have an interesting way how you govern this, right? So you have basically a governing council, right? Can you talk a little bit about like how this works? I know there's many organizations, reputable organizations who help to keep the network really truly decentralized. I think it might be interesting to know more about it.
Sure. Yeah. So, we like to say that, we are likely the most decentralized organization. We have nodes running on every continent except Antarctica, and that is because of the governing council. So the governing council today is 31 of the world's largest organizations. And
Mhm.
the reason for that governance model was taken actually from the Visa network. So if you think about a network that has been able to scale and do billions of transactions at that speed, that's a really great model to say, yep, I should probably think about governance that way, right? And Visa is governed by similarly a network of banks and financial institutions that all work together to make sure that any changes to the network, any decisions made are not just being made by one organization or by a small handful of developers or by a few folks who can, arbitrarily make those changes, depending on what they want to do today. So there is a voting process where council members have to vote on everything from new council members that are brought in to the network fees to the technical changes that happen on the network. And this really avoids collusion. It avoids the ability for a small group of people to make those decisions sort of in the dark. We actually publish all of the council meeting minutes, and we write those, those are hashed to the network. Anyone can go see them. They're also on the website. And so you can, you really want to make sure, even though sometimes it takes a little longer because building consensus and making sure that people understand those decisions that they're voting on is, can be slow, it makes sure that those are thoughtful decisions that are really thinking about what is the long-term, goals of the network. And because there are so many of them and they are spread across different industries and different geographies, again, you're not likely to have, 30 of the world's largest companies agree on anything. I know people have conspiracy theories about all kinds of things, but if you've ever tried to drive consensus among large organizations, you know that you really have to do that work to make sure that they understand it and they are not going to collude.
And you know what? We're actually, and by the way, just to remind folks like who have never maybe heard about Hedera before, like we're talking about like really were like biggest companies. So they're like Dell, Google, Hitachi, IBM, LG, like Ubisoft, and many other like banks like Nomura. Obviously, you're going to put up all the logos and like of them, but also, what really was impressive for me that like when I was preparing for this interview, like that every member has required to run a node, but like and they're compensated only like not more than not less than a node like distributes, and also if I'm not mistaken, there's a 3-year maximum term, and then like with up to 2 consecutive terms. So there's a rotation. So meaning that like even if they want to collude at some point, which is hard as you mentioned, like you thought through the process how like people will actually like appreciate being like a node holder, so to speak, right?
That's right. And I think, we do see that, yeah, I think that's another angle of decentralization, right? So decentralized over time as well, so that these are not, permanent council members. They understand that, but they've also now had the experience of, this is in many ways their first experience with distributed ledger technology. So for them to go through the process of, okay, what is it going to take for me to run a node? What infrastructure do I have to stand up? How do I deal with this with my legal and finance departments? Dell actually published a great paper that basically was like, this was actually a journey for us. We had to figure out how to get here, and here's how we did it. Because it is not a trivial thing for these companies to be able to stand up these nodes.
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, they have like commitment and responsibility towards the entire ecosystem. So I'm curious to like go next in terms of like the use cases, right? So you obviously have like a lot in payments, like in, decentralized finance, even NFTs, like so. But there are some that for me, are a little bit controversial, like CBDC. So I'm not going to touch this topic, right? So, but what are your favorites? Obviously, there is multiple that are beautiful use cases, but like, if you would to define like top three that you think they're really interesting for the real world applications.
Sure. So I think one that is really top of mind right now is, how DLT and blockchain can be used to hold AI accountable. We talked a little bit at the beginning about trust, right? And I think Edelman, which is a big PR agency, put out earlier this year something that they call their trust barometer, and they measure, people's opinions on trust in certain institutions every year. Probably no surprise to a lot of people, trust is at an all-time low. So trust in all kinds of systems, whether that is government or banking or, our healthcare, trust in all of those is at an all-time low. And there is a growing concern about AI and AI generated content, not just in the ways of, hey, people make inappropriate generated content about other humans. That's horrible. But also, if we are starting to put AI into our systems and people don't necessarily know where that content is coming from, where those large language models are, developed, how they are working, what's the input, then we have an issue in terms of trust in the output. And so, DLT is a great way to demonstrate, okay, here are the inputs, and you can, actually record on the ledger, here are the sort of requirements for, what I have put in there. You can also demonstrate, when you think about things like, okay, has this model, for example, incorporated feedback from a wide variety of people, right? People of different genders, races, ages, all those kinds of things. Is it a trustworthy model? So those are computational inputs. Those are things where, people say, well, it's great because, AI can just ingest everything that we've ever done. But what is that everything, right? Is that everything a great source of truth? Is it true, for example, medical information? Is it medical information that people gave their consent to be shared in an AI model? Those are all the kinds of things that I think big enterprises are really grappling with as they say, this technology is amazing and I really want to use it, but I'm going to have to put some guardrails around it because otherwise I'm going to get in big trouble. Right? If I use patient data without their consent and it gets, used in this AI model, and then I have a bunch of outputs and products that depend on that, that's a big no-no. So I think this, we actually, in Davos about a month ago, we had a company called Equity Lab that demonstrated their first model that actually leverages Hedera to demonstrate some of that AI lineage and provenance. And all of that is written on the Hedera consensus service. So that is one where I think, all new technologies have two sides, right? They have the ability to do amazing good, and you're already seeing, things like, well, gosh, AI could be really good at reading, scans, and could be really good at helping to diagnose. But we have to be careful in terms of, that we put up on the appropriate guardrails.
Oh yes, 100%. I mean, I know you guys are doing like a great job in this, like, and you work on Hyperledger Fabric or like Porta, like, I think the fact that people miss around blockchain in general, that like it's revolutionary that you can keep part of the information with a public key available for someone, like at the same time hold a private key, and like some part of the rest of the information is still like encrypted and secure. And we tend to like forget that this is actually revolutionary. Now, my personal belief, and I'm sure you have shared the same, that like eventually all big banks, corporations, private or public, eventually will just use this as a ledger for sure. The question is that you're touching upon, right? It's also like how to make it more secure and that like, somebody would not abuse this power, right? So So we talked about other use cases which are like, also pretty interesting. Like, you told like, about, so you talked about like supply chain of fast, like when goods were like are verified and the life cycle. So that's the provenance. What about, let's say, like more like I would say funky examples, right? Like NFT. You mentioned about like LG actually using Hedera Hashgraph, like, for NFT use case. Can you talk a lot about it?
Yes, absolutely. So LG is one of our council members, and as you know, LG makes these big, beautiful TVs, right? A very physical, real world product. I think one of the things that we have seen with NFTs is, okay, that's great. I can share it on Twitter. I can maybe show you on my phone, but when you are starting to think about the progression of art and really beautiful, large scale art that people are doing, do you really just want to be able to show it to someone else on your phone? Or do you maybe want to also be able to show it on your, huge screen TV that is in your room and that you'd love to have running while you have a party? So LG actually has art marketplace, and it's an NFT marketplace, and you can then also, buy, but also demonstrate those NFTs directly on your LG enabled TVs. So we are starting to see, that real world and digital world connection come together. And I think, like we talked about, very similar to the web, once these processes start to engage our real lives, that's when you're going to see that broader adoption. And I actually, I think that a lot more people, if they are able to say, we're not there today yet, right? But if they're able to say, yep, great, I can do this through all the current interfaces that I work with, and I don't ever have to know that it's Web3, or I don't ever have to interact with a Web3 wallet, that's when we're going to see that mass adoption.
And yeah, I think it's actually very practical, and hopefully that will change the perception of NFTs for a lot of people. So it's not just like monkeys that are cost like $100,000 and plus. So there are actual real like applications which can be useful in many ways.
Yeah, and I think, give people the benefits, right? So when you think about NFT ticketing, right? And then, okay, I have it, and not only can I show that I went to that event, but maybe then I have a rewards program or a loyalty program because I have gone to 17 Taylor Swift concerts or whatever it is. Maybe those people get the front of the line and don't have to deal with Ticketmaster the next time around.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really amazing use case. And I've seen those, and a lot of private clubs right now, instead of issuing like, just a regular, membership like email or something, they actually provide you an NFT.
That's right.
And with new protocols that will allow you to actually mix it with tokens, I think like that will open up a new Pandora box, right? So I'm excited about it. So I'm happy to hear that you are also on this path. We talked a little bit about also like about real asset, real asset tokenization, which is I would say a topic that is equally complicated, right? Where a lot of people are like, 2018, there was a huge wave of STOs, right? Everybody wanted to tokenize everything, like from a castle to a hotel to like literally everything they can. And
Yeah,
then quickly realized that the legal fees, that the structuring, it's not that easy. It's like like a mini IPO, right? So it doesn't make
right.
sense all the time. Yet there are still like interesting applications, and we know that like there are already regulated secondary market exchanges, right, for STO, like and for the companies that are doing real asset tokenization. So you are also working with some big corporations to pivot like certain like brilliant use cases. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that is an asset in the real world can be tokenized and can get the benefits of that, right? It can get the benefits of a lower time to, reduced time to settlement, lower cost of settlement. Another one of our council members, Aberdeen, they are a multi-billion-dollar fund manager, and they are tokenizing some of their mutual funds on Hedera. So if you imagine you own a mutual fund and you decide, gosh, I'd really like to I'd like to sort of rebalance my portfolio. I'd like to sell this mutual fund and buy this other one. If you think about it, the settlement time, I think you get that notice maybe the next day. It's not super fast, right? So in terms of, being able to sort of demonstrate that settlement time, and then not having to say, great, now I got a piece of paper that I have to go file that now shows me, what kinds of transactions I've done, or I have an email. The ability to just benefit from all of the things that tokenization brings, right? In terms of, okay, it's a digital record, it's fast, it's secure, I can prove that it was done, I can prove when it was done. So they're doing that for their funds. On the other side, we do see companies that actually have gone through the process that you just talked about, which is, okay, let's actually still try to do that work and figure out if legal and regulatory frameworks can continue to develop and we can get comfortable with them. So we have, startups who are tokenizing home equity. I think one of the big challenges in this country is the cost of buying your first home, right? So Quarter Homes has actually said, okay, great. Maybe you don't get all of the equity, but maybe if you're willing to have a co-investor, you can tokenize your home and you can say, great, I only have enough right now to have 60% of the equity. So, the down payment, I'm going to take 60% and 40%, an investor is willing to put in, and, all of that is tokenized. And then over time, I have the option to, keep that at that same level, but still be earning equity in my home. Or if I am lucky, I can actually buy that out. And it's a much more seamless way. I can't really think of a real world equivalent except for maybe friends and family where you can do that today. And so for a vast majority of the population, they don't have just, whatever Uncle Scrooge or whoever he is, willing to do that. And so this is a really interesting way for people to be able to get into that market, where that hasn't been accessible before. So everything from, houses and other physical assets to financial assets.
100%. I do believe that what you're describing is basically fractional ownership, where people with the entry level barrier, like to buy something like a hotel, like we're talking about like 10 to $20 million, right? Not
That's
everyone
right.
has opportunity. So, but
Yeah.
if you tokenize it, then you can, let's say, enter with I don't know, $10,000, and there's multiple
Right.
investors. And soon I think it's going to go down like traditional crowdfunding platforms to $100 and less, right? So that's going to
Yeah.
be a beautiful way to share the opportunity, right, in any asset class that you believe. Like in my previous hedge fund, we tokenized first whiskey distillery, which is also
Okay.
just an interesting experimentation. I think more and more people who experiment, like yourself as well, like in your Hedera, and it's gonna show us some examples, practical examples, how it's working well. My only challenge in this is also look, the secondary market is still very slow, right? The liquidity is not there, so
Yes.
so that might take time. So don't be discouraged. We know about this problem. Just we have to be honest about it also. So this it's still very early, but
Yeah.
it's great. So let me ask you, what do you see? Where do you see the future? Like, if you were to bet on one use case that will be I would say those this driver of mass adoption. That's something that will be so easy, somebody was trying to tokenize, I'm sorry to mention you're one of your rivals, but the Starbucks deal, right? Which is just has already a lot of users. And by creating an NFT based, stars and any bonuses that you can get within the app, that's actually very natural. And a user like myself, I wouldn't be able to even know about it. I wouldn't care that
Yeah.
it's on the blockchain. It would be
Yeah.
so organic. And we're talking about those examples, of also interoperability.
Yeah.
We discussed it before that even though imagine those use cases, they will have more and more adoption, but one of the biggest challenges is still I mean, how do we enter this market where simple number one wallet is MetaMask, right?
Yeah.
And there's not many chains that actually support MetaMask. Ironically, Bitcoin, you would not be able to even send there. So can you talk a little bit where do you see we can improve our as an industry our
Right.
performance?
Right. So I think I think it will actually not be in some of the crypto native wallets that we see, right? Because like you said, MetaMask is the most used. It is fairly easy to use if you are crypto native, but it is not in the part of your everyday workflow for anything else.
Yep.
So actually on Valentine's Day, we announced Mondelez, which is the company behind some of my favorite chocolates, Toblerone and Cadbury's and Milka, and some of my kids' favorite things, Oreos and Sour Patch Kids and Tate's cookies.
I'm
They
waiting for
are
your package. I'm sorry. I
I
need a.
know, I know. I was like, okay, we gotta figure out how we brand all of it, right? But they are taking a really interesting approach, and they said, great, we know that the market is fairly saturated, but and so we want to be a leader in digital transformation. We want to have a much more direct customer engagement. So if you imagine how you purchase their products today, you absolutely don't go to a Mondelez store, right? You go to your local grocery store or, or convenience store or whatever it may be, and their product is just one of many that you pick up. They have no idea who you are. They don't know anything about your demographics. They can't reward you for your behavior. They just sort of get that from that report from the stores.
Mhm.
And so their idea is great digital transformation. How do we connect more directly with the customer? And how do we solve, for example, a very real world problem that they have, that they and the customer have today, which is starting with something like couponing, right? So a coupon, again, a very physical coupon, you don't actually know who's used it at that store, right? But if it is a digital coupon or there's a digital payment aspect of it, then now all of a sudden I have a much deeper consumer engagement. And they work with a company called SKUX that is an expert in the payment space. They have background in traditional coupons, background in payments, and they have basically said, look, we are not going to require customers to download a new app or to, download a new wallet or anything like that. We will give them, the things that they can do, right? I have a phone, I have a QR code reader, I have a camera. And if I can make that engagement that simple, then not only do I reduce the fraud in couponing from physical coupons, but I also have this first step on this digital transformation journey where I can start to have more demographics about my customer, engage them more deeply, and really develop a relationship with them. So I think it'll be in ways that hopefully we actually don't ever see. Right? It is not something where where we are saying, "Yep, I'm so happy that everybody has a MetaMask wallet now." It is. I'm so happy that everybody is benefiting from this speed and the security and these super fast and low cost transactions, and it's all in the background, and we're just eating our cookies and chocolate.
First of all, I'm a big fan of cookies and chocolate, so yeah, you don't have to sell me this part, right? So, but what I do want to specify here, like I think it's a really beautiful example, like the where the future can be like more interactive between the brands and the customers. But here's like the two challenges here. Like first of all, I would love you to elaborate a little bit in a perfect scenario. How would that work? Let's say I come to a deli, like I want to buy my favorite Toblerone, like chocolate, right? So
Yeah.
do I have to specifically pay with crypto, or I can use any digital wallet per se? So I think it's worthwhile talking about this part. And then if you can also elaborate a little bit about the part where like how the privacy, like in the data protection works, right? So which information like are you taking and which information stays, anonymous with the customer?
Right. So I think no, you won't be using a crypto wallet and you probably won't be paying in crypto, but there will be a tokenization aspect of it, right? So, you will agree that, you can share certain amounts of your data and you can decide, well, maybe I want to earn, 3 tokens for sharing this amount of data, or maybe I want to earn 5 tokens because I'm willing to share more data. So it is not, it is not crypto in the currency sense, but that applied cryptography on the back end is really enabling these kinds of tokenization of your data if you choose, right? So, or maybe, maybe it's a $5 coupon if you choose to share, I don't know, a selfie of yourself doing this, there's so many ideas there, right? In terms of when you think about, being able to do that at a very granular level. And you just can't do that today with the traditional sort of fiat and other systems, right? Because it's just not cost effective, right? I can't give you, I can't give you a 25-cent rebate on your current credit card because the cost of the credit card transaction is more than that, right? So the kinds of things that you can do when you think about micropayments, when you think about tokenization of data and customer journeys, is far beyond what we're thinking about today. I think it's sort of like, when the internet first came out, you wouldn't have thought that the best use case or one of the great use cases that everybody would use all the time was hailing a cab, right? You would be like, no, why would I do that?
And I think, yeah, I can sell you, by the way, also another use case and idea. Like, yes, if somebody would be able to tokenize the amount of chocolates I ate as a kid, like especially Toblerone, like, and I would get probably a lot of rebates. I would probably have already 50% discount in any duty free in the world. Okay, so
That's right.
I want this for my kids. Like I want this for your kids. Like at least like if they're committed with a brand and they eat a lot of chocolates, they need to be rewarded. Okay, so.
That's right.
So discount system, at least like even if you don't give like tokens, not necessarily, you can give like maybe a discount, right? For the product that
Yeah.
people actually love and they stay committed to.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about you, but my kids love collecting digital things, right? Like
Fun.
it's gotten,
Pokemon.
yeah, or like the FIFA characters or this or, or badges. So maybe it's different, right? Maybe for a consumer like me who really, I just want the chocolate and the discount, right? Like maybe they realize, okay, you're not interested in like a badge that you can wear when you go play in one of those realms. But maybe for my kids, they're like, yep, that's absolutely what I want. And, I want I don't know, Toblerone hat or something else that they create for you in the metaverse where, you're engaged with it. And so I think really thinking about what does that particular customer want is really important.
Yeah, that's actually it's a great idea. So that it will be more and more like cater to a particular need of a customer, which now there's just a gap between the like them and they have to pay surveys and like guess like do poll groups, etc., which sometimes just not efficient because it's not individualized. So um, coming back to the other conversation we had with you before, like you mentioned that like there is also a beautiful use case of like saving like we're like the ECG initiative is not just some, with all due respect, I'm sorry, but this is my show, so I can say like BS, like when the people just do it because like, and a lot of them like are not actually efficient at all. Those are just like labels for the big organizations. But you mentioned something very interesting where like companies like Hyundai, like and Kia actually want to put like their like themselves accountable for carbon emissions, right? And that will be on Hadera Hashgraph. Can you explain us how would that work?
Yeah, and it's not just Hyundai and Kia. It's really them also trying to hold their supply chain accountable.
Mhm.
So, there is a very, very complex sort of supply chain in terms of, and we probably won't get into all of it today, but in terms of carbon emissions and how companies report it, and can they demonstrate what they have done? But the first step is really sort of showing, okay, let's at least get all of our suppliers onto one chain where they are reporting that, right? So that I can then to the customer say, okay, this is the total emissions in terms of what it cost to put together your car. So if you would like to offset that, then I have a very clear way to demonstrate to you, I didn't just make this number up. It's not the same, for everyone. It may vary over time depending on costs and inputs and supply chains or suppliers. And so I think, having that customer then really trust what is coming to them, right? That's the first step in transparency. And like you said, and sort of cutting through the BS, right? It's, you see some of these things and you're like, okay, great. I don't know that, I don't know how you came up with that number. I have no idea,
Yeah.
like how you
How to
justify
verify?
that.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
to verify?
Yeah. But if you can go through and at least start to have each of your suppliers demonstrating that, and, on the back end, at some point, hopefully they will be linked to some of these carbon marketplaces. Hopefully it will go all the way back to, great, I can actually prove, that this was the farm from which I bought the carbon offsets, and that same offset hasn't also been purchased by somebody else. So there's not a dual spend problem. So those are the kinds of things that I think we're starting to see companies say, yep, I've got to start somewhere. I know it's not perfect, but I'm trying to bring that transparency and that actual accountability to that supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you as an organization like committed to being like carbon negative public network, and that you also purchase of quarterly carbon credits to offset the small amount of emissions, from public facing infrastructure. You have UCL Center for Blockchain Technology that's, efficiently working with a lot of other organizations, which I think is worthwhile mentioning because, some of the companies, again, do it just because it's like popular. I know you guys are actually trying to make a difference. And not many organizations, which I know even the top in our industry, are doing that. So I appreciate this. Now, like if you were to dream a little bit, right? Let's put ourselves like, into like, we're in 2024 right now. Let's talk, I know in crypto it's hard to talk anything beyond like few years because it's like dog years in real world.
Sure. Yeah.
But let's dream a little bit, like in the comment, let's say till like in this 2000, I don't know, till 2030, what would be your like biggest predictions for the upcoming years in terms of the difference? What are the like DLT technologies and public blockchains like they will change in the world infrastructure? How will they will impact the world besides already beyond the levels of case studies you presented, but maybe some other things which we don't see today, but you as a person who's a visionary and works on it like on an everyday level, like write a lot of research papers, present, you see that it will happen, let's say in 5 years.
Sure. Yeah, I do. I do still have this hope that the pendulum will be able to swing back and DLT will be able to be a part of it in terms of this trust, right? We see just society have an all-time low in terms of trust in our institutions and our organizations and our leaders. And I think those who are willing to say, yep, I'm going to hold myself accountable, will be able to help rebuild that trust. I don't know if we'll get there in 6 years. I think it might take us a little bit longer than that. But, I really hope that some of those things where people say, okay, we're just arguing on the internet and, everybody, all sides are equal. There's good people on both sides. Like maybe we can just go back to the data and be able to point to it and be able to say, okay, this is why, people will get smarter about that. They'll be able to say, you know what, I can cut through a lot of this very, very quickly because I now have this computational trust and I know what I can believe in. When I think about things like journalism, right? I mean, so having worked in PR, having worked with so many journalists, they don't go into it, and especially the print journalists, they don't go into it to get rich and famous, right? They go into it because they have this desire to tell stories and to get to the truth and to uncover things that need to be uncovered. And the fact that, journalism has been so under fire and has been so questioned. And, some of it is some people have been bad actors and have done bad things. But if we can help that industry really rebuild its trust to the point where, they are unflappable, right? We can trust the sources of the things that we read online. I think that is really important for us as a society. I think that's really harming some of the underlying fabric of our society. If we can trust, nonprofit institutions where we give our dollars and we can say, yep, that one is still worthy of my time. That one maybe not, because instead of helping the poor, they have decided to line their own pockets, right? And I can see that in I can see that in a public ledger and a public accounting, perhaps, of their spending. Why wouldn't all nonprofits want to share, maybe not this the very, very granular specifics, but something where the public can say, yep, okay, I trust that. And maybe that guy shouldn't be driving a Maserati, because I know where that money has been spent. So I think those kinds of institutions, government, again, the politicians will always be people, but government agencies who are doing good work. When we think about, okay, you're thinking about something like, okay, will we build Ukraine, and how many billions of dollars will that cost to do it? And then how do you account for that, right? You always hear the stories of, well, that money just disappeared. We have no idea where it went. We have no accounting for it. That is something that is perfect for a public ledger, right? Hold people accountable, hold them accountable for those billions in spending. And then you won't have people saying, I'm not sure where it went. I can see exactly where it went. And so I think those are the kinds of areas where, I hope that we have the ability to play a role. I think shorter term, we are starting to see some of the areas where we have had monopolies or, duopolies or sort of cartels be broken down, right? I think you probably are very familiar with things like DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, right? When you think about, okay, well, there were like, a big set of telcos, and, it's been very hard for new entrants to come into some of those kinds of spaces, right? But the ability to say, well, maybe let's crowdfund, maybe let's, build some of these other kinds of networks, and have from day one, people have that great visibility into how those are working, and they have a role in it, and they get to participate in it. Those are some of the kind of exciting first steps, I think, in maybe, maybe not rebuilding, but maybe building from scratch some of these new networks and organizations that can really be trusted.
Yeah, I mean, you touched a lot of interesting topics. Like, I don't know even to to comment on them, but I agree. Like, a lot of those use cases are very important. Like especially misinformation. I think it's hurting, like as you mentioned, the fabric of our society, and it's just because of the sheer opportunity to impact like millions, like sitting from your home, like just broadcasting live, like I don't know, like Instagram, like session, and then you can like say things which are like crazy and
Right.
nobody will hold you accountable, right? So that's like, the benefit of technology. Our communication level became much faster, right? It's accessible, but that comes with responsibility, which I'm sure we're still yet to discover how this works. Like for now, it's crazy. Like we have amounts of misinformation, which is like just never been previously in the history. So I
Yeah.
do believe like putting like accountable, especially at least like in retrospect, right? You can verify fact checking, like as you mentioned, is very important. And then especially if the organization, let's say there's a scoring system and the organization is lying a lot, like, it would be great to kind of hold accountable, whether it's a profit or non-profit organization or it's a government entity, doesn't really matter. We have to hold
Right.
accountable. So, by the way, I don't know if you know that I'm from Ukraine, by the way, and I just want to also like say like few words that like I was born there, and looking what they're doing right now is actually one of the few countries in the world that has digitized the passport. Like now you can present a passport in your iPhone, and it will have an equivalent of a physical passport. And everything will be on blockchain. Now there is a project that is gonna digitize on blockchain all the land like in Ukraine. So it'll be very, very like, transparent and accountable. And like the country, people don't understand that before the war, it was 180,000 blockchain developers, one of the biggest pools in the world of blockchain developers. So I do
Yeah.
believe once the war is over, it will be much better world. I do agree with you that like it would be great also to hold accountable any politicians who are like receiving donations. I mean, I think it's also a fair question, right? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
criticism. I'm not going to go into this. It's political
Well,
stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
I will say we worked with the Ministry of Digital Finance for Ukraine. They're one of the most impressive groups I have worked with. Their understanding of the technology, their ability to get things done. They're just incredible country and incredible group of people there.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, not many people know that I don't want to put names just not to advertise, but one of the top 10 protocols, out of them, 7 were developed in Ukraine. Like all the core team of developers were outsourced in Ukraine. So
Yeah,
naturally, there's a lot of talent pool and a lot of, and there's actually a digital transformation ministry. Not many countries have this
that's right.
special ministry focused on digital transformation. So it's done a lot, like, so I really believe that the war is over. There's going to be a bright future on this aspect of life for sure. So thank you for mentioning this. Like, it's, very important, especially like our heart is, for all the Ukrainians. So it's happening. Um, but I want to also like, I want to ask you, because we go into the end of the interview, like more personal question. And I don't notify people on purpose, like, like, because it's fun, like you
All
had.
right.
This is probably one of the most important questions I've asked you so far, right? So we do what we do for a reason, right?
Yeah.
That's what differentiates us from many other species, right? So what is the meaning of life to you, Zenobia?
Oh gosh. You really throw this one in there, right?
Yep.
I think as I get older, it means it is more about what can I do for others and how will they remember me, right? It is as you grow up, as you have kids, you realize sort of that your life is quite fleeting. I mean, we're only here for a very short period of time. And, I think when you're young, you really want to sort of make your mark on the world, right? And have your career success and be remembered. And then when you sort of start to look back, you say, well, you know what, like, not that many people are really remembered, and like I'm not discovering the cure for polio, so probably that's not, I mean that's nice, and people study you in the history books, but it really is about what are you doing day to day? How are you engaging with your family and your friends? And how are you? We talk a lot at the dinner table. We ask the kids like, who were you helpful to today? And it's really there. I mean, they're so funny. Like their versions of, what was helpful and what other kids find helpful are not only hilarious, but I think that, having that frame really also helps us, right? Because it helps us to think about, how can we leave this place better than when we came into it.
That's beautiful. You see, and it's also beautiful because it was very genuine, right? So you didn't prepare for this. Where can people find you? Like, where can they connect you? Are you more on LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Zenobia Godschalk, Twitter, I'm Zenobia Zag, Z-A-G. So either of those places is great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really, it was a pleasure. Like, I'm sure that anyone who has more questions, they're either like contact you directly or going to ask questions, like when we publish this interview, like in the comment section. I hope, for the best question, maybe you will send a little bit of chocolates, to the people. So,
We're working on that.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
yeah, so we'll announce like when it's going to be a second session. We're gonna like do like a giveaway, right? Box of chocolates, right?
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Nambi. It was a pleasure.